Hello everyone, this is Archana from Edureka and I welcome you all to this live session on test automation frameworks. So guys, before we proceed, let's quickly go through today's agenda first. We will begin this session by discussing what is automation testing and why is it so important. Then we will discuss different approaches that you can consider to start automation. Then we'll move on to our today's topic, which is test automation framework. Here, we'll see what test automation frameworks actually are and different type of automation frameworks that are available in the market. Finally, we'll end this session with a demo where we'll see how to build a framework using Selenium. I hope agenda was clear to you guys. Let's get started then. So do you guys agree with me when I say every system has software bugs? Well, it's true. It's impossible to design and bring out a perfect software product. Imperfections in software can sometimes cause unbelievable disasters. So testing software only becomes more valuable and important to us as we welcome new applications and different kind of devices into our home and businesses to take command of important tasks. So guys, software testing is basically the process of executing the software or any application to find out if there are any bugs or some sort of errors in it. As the name already suggests, software testing means checking the developed software for any mistakes and problems in the initial design of the software. So before software goes public, programmers spend hours trying to iron out every little bug there is in an application. They check for any mistakes and problems in the design functionality of the software. Until then, product won't be available for commercial use. So that's what software testing is. And software testing is broadly classified as manual testing and automation testing. So manual testing, it's pretty self-explanatory, right? Testing of a web application is done manually by human action. This means that someone actually goes on a device to evaluate numerous components like design, functionality, and performance of a software. But testing to find defects and bugs manually is very time consuming, expensive, often repetitive, and subject to human error. So this is where automation comes into picture. Automated testing is well automated. So automation testing uses different kind of tools, scripts, and software to perform test cases by repeating certain predefined actions. So this makes testing much more easier when compared to manual testing. These days, automation is literally everywhere. For example, Amazon is testing delivery drones that pick up warehouse orders sorted by robots. Google is testing self-driving cars. Starbucks is testing cashier-free stores which are dedicated to mobile ordering and payment. And Facebook is testing a brain-computer interface that may one day translate your thoughts into digital text. Cool, right? So automation is literally everywhere. So it has a lot of advantages over manual testing. It saves a lot of time and money, lot of effort on your part, improves test accuracy, increases test coverage, complex tests are made really easy in automation. It increases efficiency and team morale. You no longer have to do boring tasks and that too repetitively. There'll be no human errors. It reduces maintenance cost as well. It increases speed of executing tests and many more advantages. I can just keep going. So automation testing is absolutely essential today to successfully deliver large-scale products that need execution of repetitive and complex test cases. So now there are different kind of approaches that you can consider to start automation. Let's take a look at them. So to begin with, we have code-driven approach. Here the focus is mainly on text case execution to find out if the various section of code that you've written is performing as per your expectations under different conditions or not. So this code-driven testing approach is a popular method used in agile software development. This approach uses testing frameworks like XUnit framework, NUnit framework, and many others. And then there is graphical user interface testing. You can use this when you have applications that have graphical user interfaces. It allows the testers to record user actions and analyze them any number of times. For example, let's say you want to test a website. You can use automated testing tool like Selenium, and you do not have to be very thorough at the programming as well. So test cases can be written in a number of programming languages like C#, Java, Perl, Python, and many others. And the last approach is our today's topic, which is test framework approach. A test automation framework is literally a set of guidelines or rules which are used to produce beneficial results of automated testing activity. So if you have not understood the definition, don't worry about it for now, because since this is our today's topic, we'll explore more about it. But before diving into the most common types of frameworks and their benefits, let's clarify what a test automation framework actually is. So basically, a framework is a combination of set of protocols, rules, standards, guidelines that can be followed to leverage the benefit provided by the framework. Okay, let's consider a real life scenario. We very often use lifts or elevators, right? And you might have noticed few safety guidelines, those are mentioned within the elevator. I'm sure you might have noticed, right? Like keep a check on the maximum capacity of the elevator, do not get into elevator if the maximum capacity is reached, do not play or jump inside the elevator, do not smoke inside the elevator, or in case of fire or if there is any other hazard situation, avoid the use of elevator, such guidelines. So you think you can ride an elevator even without following these guidelines? Well, definitely yes, you can. But if the guidelines are followed, it will result in a beneficial outcome, like you can avoid getting hurt. You can safely reach your destination. So guidelines, if followed, makes the system more beneficial, accessible, scalable, and less trouble for the users. That's what a framework is. It's a combination of set of protocols, standards, guidelines that can be followed to make our life much more easier. Similarly, a software testing framework is a set of guidelines or rules used for creating and designing test cases. Framework is a constructive brand of various guidelines, coding standards, concepts, processes, practices, project hierarchies, modularity. I can just keep going. So basically, it's just a set of rules and guidelines which are universally followed by testers everywhere. So this way, a user can follow these guidelines while automating application to take advantages of various productive results. Testing frameworks are an essential part of any successful automated testing process. Utilizing a framework for automated testing will offer a lot of benefits, like it will increase teams' test speed and efficiency. It will improve test accuracy and will reduce test maintenance cost as well. It offers minimal manual intervention. You will not have to run test scripts manually or input test data every time you want to start a testing process. Furthermore, there will not be any need to monitor the test scripts. An automation framework make reporting results much more easier, faster, and apt. This way, frameworks make testing seem so much simpler for a tester. But guys, you need to remember that framework is just guidelines and not mandatory rules. So you can still script without following these guidelines. But you will miss out the advantages of using a framework, that's all. So now that we have basic idea of what an automation test framework is, let's discuss various types of test automation frameworks. Those are available in market. So guys, there are about 6 common types of test automation frameworks, each with their own architecture and different benefits and advantages. So while building out a test plan, it's important to choose the framework that is right for you. To select the right one, you must know about them, right? So let's get started. The first one is linear automation framework. It's also referred to as record and playback framework. Here, testers don't need to write code to create functions. The testers record each step such as navigation, user input, checkpoint separately. So they check all the steps separately and then they play the script to automatically conduct the test from beginning in sequential order. So I hope you have got the point, right? So basically there are 2 steps. First, you record each step like login details or if the application is opening properly or not. And then you play the automation script, which will start the sequentially executing all the steps. For example, let's say you have a flight login checkup application. Here, as you can see, the first line is if the application is opening or not. Then it's logging username, entering password, clicking on the button OK. Then if login is successful or not. So first you check all the steps individually. Then you run the automated script so that all the steps are checked sequentially and one after the other. So the advantages of this linear automation framework are here the tester need not write the code. Test workflow is easier to understand for any party involved in testing, right? It's very simple, the basic kind of automation framework. When it comes to disadvantages, the scripts developed using this framework aren't reusable because they aren't divided into different modules or anything, so you can't reuse them. Maintenance is considered a hassle because any changes made to application will require a lot of rework. You have to rewrite your script based on your application requirements. and they do keep changing. So linear automation framework is that. Moving on to next one, we have data-driven framework. So while automating or testing any application, at times you might have to test the same functionality multiple times with different set of input data. So in such cases, we cannot embed test data in the test script itself because we have to run the test data for different kind of test scenarios, right? So that's where data-driven framework comes into picture. Data-driven testing framework helps the user segregate the test script logic and the test data from each other. Tester can store and pass the input-output parameter to test script from an external data source such as it can be Excel sheets, text files, CSV files, SQL tables, or ODBC repositories or anything, any other kind of external data source. So advantages of using this data-driven framework is that multiple scenarios can be tested quickly. You will save time by executing more tests more faster. And when it comes to disadvantages, obviously you will need a highly experienced tester who is proficient in various programming languages to properly utilize this framework. Setting up a data-driven framework takes a significant amount of time when compared to others. Well, to make it much more easier for you guys, I even have a diagram as you can see on the screen. Here you have a data file or the external source where you have different kind of data. This data is fed to your driver script or your automation script, and the script is run on application. And the results which you get from running the test are compared with the expected output. That's how you perform a data-driven framework. Moving on to a next kind of framework, which is keyword-driven framework. Keyword-driven testing framework is an extension to data-driven testing, except that it not only segregates the test data from the script, it also keeps certain set of code belonging to the test script in an external data file. So we use a table format to define keywords or action words for each method that we could execute in our script. For example, as you can see, I have a keyword called click link, which depicts the click user portal link on the home page. Input data to enter username, input data to enter password. Similarly, I have different keywords for different modules, or you can say different methods that we use in our script. So once the table has been set up, all testers have to do is write the code that will prompt the necessary action based on the keyword. So when the test is run, test data is read and pointed towards the corresponding keyword, which then executes the relevant script. I hope you got my point, right? So basically you create a table, you assign different keyword to different methods that you're using in your script. And as soon as your table is run, you start writing your script in such a way that as soon as the keyword is accessed, certain action is performed based on your table. So that's what keyword driven framework is all about. And few advantages are like minimal scripting knowledge is needed here because we're using keywords and actions that decreases the amount of code that you have to write. A single keyword can be used across multiple scripts, so code is reusable. And as for the disadvantages, initial cost of setting up framework is literally high. You need to employ someone with good test automation skills here. Moving on to next one, we have modular based testing framework. Modular based testing framework is based on one of the popularly known OOPS concept, which is abstraction. The framework divides the entire application which is under test into number of logical and isolated modules. So after breaking down the entire application into individual modules, a test script is created for each module. And then they are combined to build larger tests in an hierarchical fashion. For example, as you can see, I have an application or which acts as a calculator. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to create separate modules for different application of this calculator. For example, for scientific, if I want a scientific feature of calculator, I'll create a separate module. For standard, I'll create a separate module. Under standard, I'll create separate module for addition, subtraction, division, and multiplication. Then I combine them and make a whole new module in an hierarchical fashion. So guys, the key strategy here is to build an abstraction layer so that any changes made in any individual module won't affect other module. So that's one of the main advantage. Apart from that, creating test cases takes very less effort on your part because you can use different modules. And as for the disadvantages, data is still hard coded into test scripts since the tests are executed separately. So you cannot use the testing for multiple data sets. So that's all about modular testing framework. Moving on to our next one, which is library architecture framework. It's based on modular framework, but has some additional benefits. So here, instead of dividing the application into different modules, we segregate the application into functions, or rather common functions that can be used by other part of the application as well. These functions are then kept in a library which can be called upon by test scripts whenever they want. So the advantage here is that test maintenance and scalability is easier and much more cost effective. It has a higher degree of reusability because we are dividing the application into different functions and storing them in the library. So whenever the test scripts need any feature, it can access it from the library. So the code is reusable here. As for the disadvantage, test data is still hard coded into script. Therefore, any changes to data will require changes to the script. And apart from that, test scripts take more time to develop as well. And finally, we have hybrid testing framework. So as the name suggests, hybrid testing framework is a combination of more than one of the above discussed frameworks. The best thing about such a setup is that it leverages the benefits of all kind of associated frameworks here. So guys, these are some most commonly used automation frameworks. Now that we know about different type of frameworks, let's see how to build a data-driven framework using Selenium. So here we are guys in the demo part of the session. But before we go ahead with the demo, let me just show you the basic steps that are followed when you actually create an automation framework using any kind of tool, like here, Selenium. So now you might be wondering why Selenium, right? Demand for web development and testing is literally huge. As of January 2019, there were over 1.3 billion websites on internet serving and 3.8 plus billion internet users worldwide. So as a result, the tooling market is now more competitive than ever. But so far, no one has outshone the Selenium in terms of popularity and adoption. So when it comes to Selenium, the biggest sweet spot of Selenium is that it's open source. In other words, it's completely free to download and use. It provides an API called WebDriver, which enables testers to craft their tests in many programming languages, which includes Java, C#, Python, Ruby, and many other languages. Besides web browsers, you can also automate mobile devices like Android and iOS via APM as well. So that's why I've chosen Selenium in this demo. Moving forward, let's take a look at general steps that you need to follow when you create an automation framework using Selenium. So first of all, you need to choose a programming language. In Selenium world, you have wide range of programming languages that you can choose from. Like I said earlier, you have Java, C#, Ruby, Python, and many others. In my opinion, Java is a good choice because it's widely adopted and it's cross-platform. So in this demo, we'll be using Java, no doubt. So once you're done choosing your programming language, next you have to choose a test framework. Now you might be wondering, why do you need a test framework, right? A test framework or a unit test framework helps you to mark a class or a method as part of testing using annotations. You can execute tests in parallel, you can generate logs, you can perform the assertion, verification, and all that. So once you're done choosing your programming language and selecting a unit test framework, you need to design the framework as architecture. So make sure you come up with a sustainable, maintainable, and scalable architecture. So now based on your architecture, you start building your test modules. So next, choose a reporting mechanism. Reading the test results will be difficult if you do not have a good reporting mechanism. Let's say when you receive a test failure, how do you invest the failed test quickly to determine whether it's what kind of error it is? If it is a AUT bug or it's an intentional functional change or the automation mistake or whatever it is, how do you figure out? For that, you can use a reporting mechanism. Well, the framework, unit test framework like TestNG does offer you a reporting mechanism, but the results are not in human readable format, as in you won't understand it. For that, you can use some third-party error reporting mechanism. And last step is, if you want to, you can integrate your framework with other tools as well. For example, you have TestRail. It's a test case management system that proves useful when your project has large number of tests. Apart from that, you also have Jira integration and many others. So yeah, these are the basic steps that you follow when you're creating a framework. So guys, I forgot to tell you a point. It's that when you are choosing a unit test framework, in this demo, we'll be using a framework called TestNG. It's similar to JUnit, but it's much more powerful than that, especially in terms of testing integrated classes. It eliminates most of the limitations of older framework and gives testers the ability to write more flexible and powerful tests. So let's quickly go through the steps again. First, you need to choose a programming language of your choice. Then you need to choose a unit test framework. After that, you design your framework architecture. Based on that, you start executing your scripts and creating them. After that, you need to choose a reporting mechanism so that you will find out the errors and the reason for those errors much easily. And lastly, if you want, you can integrate your framework with other tools as well. So guys, let's get started with our demo then. For that, I need to open my Eclipse. Before that, I want you to install some extra jar files. For example, let's say since we're using Selenium here, you'll have to install Selenium jar files. And there's something called Apache POI. Well, I'll let you know what is that for later. So go ahead and download Selenium jar files and Apache POI. Let's say Selenium download. Sorry about the spelling mistake, guys. You can go for downloads here. And you can download the version here, and you can also download this one, as in the language for which you want to use Selenium. So yeah, after that, you need to install something else as well, Apache POI. Here, there's a link which says download release artifacts. Under that, you have the latest stable release. Click on that. It'll take you for the binary distribution and source distribution. Go ahead and download the zip file. And if you're using Mac and all, you can download the tar file as well. So once you've downloaded all the files, unzip them, extract them, and store all the jar files in separate folder. Well, I have stored them here in my C folder. I have a folder called Selenium, and I have all my executable jar files here. So we're ready to start a demo. So the first step you need to do is download Selenium jar files as well as Apache POI. Don't worry about Apache POI for now. Okay then, let me open my Eclipse. It's on my desktop. Here it is. Sorry about the delay, guys. Give me a minute. It should load up. Launch. So sorry about the delay, guys. Anyway, here we are on our Eclipse. Well, on my Eclipse. So I have a project which is named as Framework Demo. So before we actually get in, like I said, we have installed our Selenium jar files as well as Apache POI. Let me tell you what Apache POI is for. So guys, basically just a WebDriver doesn't directly support reading of Excel files or any kind of external data files. For that, you need to use some sort of third-party device or a program called Apache POI. So we can use Apache POI for reading, writing any Microsoft document into your program here. So we've already downloaded the jar files. I've stored them in a separate file called Selenium under my C folder. All you have to do is go for your source file, right click on it, and there's an option called build path here. Well, I've already added the libraries to my project. For you guys to do, you can go ahead for this build path, and you have an option called configure build path. Click on that. So once the dialog box opens, you have something called libraries here. Go for that and click on add external jars, and go ahead and add all the jar files which you've just downloaded and stored it in the folder. Well, I have done it already, so I'm not doing it again. And click on open, and once they're added, it's cool. You guys are ready to go. But before that, you need to install TestNG plugin as well. It's available in the Eclipse Marketplace. All you have to do is go for help here, and you have Eclipse Marketplace. Okay, it's taking time to load. Well, I've already installed, so let me not waste time here. All you have to do is go for Eclipse Marketplace. Once it's loaded, in the search tab, you can search for TestNG. And as soon as it's done, it'll show you the plugin. Click on that and click on install. It should be done. Once you've done that, all you have to do is go for Windows here and show view. And you can go for others. Okay, Marketplace is open. Since it's open, let me just show you guys. Okay. Sorry about that, guys. Here we go. And under Java, you should have TestNG installed. So if you have installed plugin properly, you will see TestNG here. That's all about it. Cancel. Okay. All you have to do is type TestNG and click on OK. So anyway, guys, all you have to do is find that in the search tab. You'll find it and click on install button. I'm not going to waste time here. Okay, here we are. Okay, here it is. TestNG for Eclipse. You can just click on install. It already says install because I already installed it. Okay, back to our program. I've set up everything here because it takes time to write the code, right? So I do not want you guys to wait for this. So I've already written. I'll explain you the program. Don't worry about it. And under the source, I have a package called Edureka, and under that I have two classes, which is my main function and another class called read Excel file. So basically, main function, what it does is it checks the login functionality of a flight booking application. So that's my main testing function. And we have another file called read Excel file. And I've written this file so that it can read the data from the external source. And as for the external source that I am using in this demo, it's an Excel sheet. I have an Excel sheet called login credentials. I have that stored in my Selenium folder. It should be in Selenium folder. Let me open the file. Here it goes. I have a file called credentials and I have two fields in that. One is username and one is password. As you can see, I have username and password and 4 entries. So getting back to Eclipse, two functions. One is my main function, which chunks the functionality of a flight booking application. Another one, which reads the data from an external file. So we're good to go. Let's start exploring the functions here. Let's start with the main function. First of all, I've imported a lot of packages here, as in different libraries here. I have Chrome driver, I have annotations, which is after method, data provider, and test. So guys, first of all, annotations are very easy to understand. Annotations in TestNG are basically lines of code that can control how the method below them will be executed. So to use those annotations, you need to import the libraries attached to them. So I have used three kind of annotations here. One is after method, data provider, and test. So yeah, the library that's related to annotations is this one. Apart from that, I also have something called assert. As we progress through, we'll get to know what that is. And then there's Chrome driver. So let's get started. This is my main class, the main function. The name of my class is main function. And here I have a Chrome driver object. I've created an object called driver of type Chrome driver. As you can see, I've divided, as in I've created it globally because I do not want it to include in the annotations, because all the functions which are written under these annotations will apply to that Chrome driver as well. So I do not want that. So I've written it globally outside my annotations. Anyway, then I have an annotation which says at test, and data provider is the name of the method is equal to test data. Let's move on to the next part of the code, which is demo project. So under this annotation, like I said earlier, an annotation is line of code that can control how the method below it works. So my method here is demo project. So basically to this method, I'm providing a username, password, and login to keep checking. And how am I doing that? I'm using a command called find element. So driver dot find element by name username, and the send keys is the username where it accepts the input. Then you have same for the password and login as well. For login, we do not accept anything because it's just a click button, right? So I have a function which says click. Apart from that, I'm also giving a link to the website in which I have to check the login functionality. That's the flight booking website. If you want, I can open it and show it to you guys. Let me copy it. Here we go to the browser and paste. So while it's loading, let's just get back to our Eclipse, as in the program. Apart from giving the link and find element, I also have used something called set property here. As in, I'm telling the program to automatically open the web browser. For that, I am using a Chrome driver here. So that's all about it. Now, here under annotation, I have something called data provider is equal to test data. What I actually mean by that is, here I'm giving username, password, and login. From where is all this data coming from? I'm saying extract the data from the method data provider. So obviously I should have another method which is called data provider, right? Here we go. I have another annotation which says data provider and the name is test data. Here under this annotation, I have an object called config, which is of type read Excel file. Read Excel file is nothing but another class or another file which I have created to read external data. So like going back to that function, this is where Apache POI comes into picture. Like I said, WebDriver directly cannot read from the external data. For that, I'll be using an Apache POI libraries. One is workbook, another one is sheet. So in this read Excel file class, I have a method Well, it's not a method, it's a constructor because it starts with the same name as that of method, right? So yeah, it's a constructor. And the constructor, I'm giving a link to my Excel part. For this, for you guys to understand this, let's just go back. So here we go. We're calling the config method as in the config object of type read Excel file dot Excel file, right? So here I'm giving the link as in the path where I've stored my credentials or the external data file. So whenever you call this object, the control goes here as an object of type read Excel file is created. So Excel path is the input which is taken here. As you can see, this is the input which I am calling the object with. So this will be stored in the Excel path and a new sheet will be created, as in the new sheet will be accessed. So getting back, I have some other functions here, sort of for other functions. Before that, let's go back here. As you can see, I've placed my entire code in a try-catch exception block. Well, if everything works well, it shouldn't throw an exception. Well, if it does, then it's caught here and the error is handled. So this is just the basic before we actually start with the main function in this read Excel file. So the main function here is one is to get the string data as in the get data, and the one is to get the row count. Now you might be wondering, why do you need row count? Here we have automated the test and we want the application login functionality to be checked for different values, for multiple values, right? So we need for how many login and the details or the username password pair do we want the application to be checked, the number of times you want to check your application. For that we need a function called getRow. Basically what it is doing is that it's taking the index of a sheet here as an input. For example, if I take you back to the sheet, it says here sheet 1, right? So 1 is the index of the sheet. So that's taking the index of that sheet. It goes to that sheet and there it's calling WB, which we just defined in the upper part web page. This WB already knows the path of where the sheet is. So using the get sheet at, it'll receive the sheet and it will get the last row's number. Suppose, for example, in this sheet I have 4 rows. So the last number should be 3 because if you remember, the index starts from 0, right? So the value of row becomes 3. But again, 3 is not right value because there are 4 rows for us to understand. So I'm adding one more to the row. So it becomes 4. Now the value of row becomes 4. Basically what I'm saying is go to the sheet and count the number of values or the number of username and password pairs that are. So we have counted and the row value is now 4. Now here, other method is get data. So basically what we're doing in this get data is going back to our main function. Here I have a demo project method which is taking data from this data provider, and that data provider is calling for a get function. As you can see here, it's calling the get data function here. So I'm creating an object called credentials which has countable number of rows but 2 columns. As you can see, we have 2 columns which is login username and password, but the number of rows actually depends on how much data there is. As for here, we have 4 rows. So I hope now you understand why we actually counted the number of rows here, right? So here we call the rows and we have called the row count method, which will be 4. So this will be 4 and 2. So I've created an object of type array here, which we have 2 values. So it's 2-dimensional array. So now to get the data, I'm calling get data method and I'm passing 3 parameters as you can see. The first one is going back to the method. The first is a sheet number. Then you have the row and the column. So as soon as this method gets the parameter, which is sheet number, row and column, first of all, using sheet number, it goes to that particular sheet using WB. And once it has gone to that sheet, it goes to that particular row, particular column and gets the value and stores that value in the data. And I'm returning this data back to the method which called this method, which will be in my main function. So the value is which is extracted by this method or which is written by this method is stored in this credential. Similarly, here again. So this way we are fetching data. And once the data is stored, I'm saying written credentials, which will go back to this demo project because in the annotations, I have said extract data from this method, which is data provider. So from data provider, all the data which we just extracted will go here and will be assigned in the username, password. Once the data is extracted, it will be clicked on login. So I hope you've understood, right? I hope it's not confusing. Let me just summarize quickly. So if you have not understood, you will understand it at least this time. So basically I have a Chrome driver which is defined outside because I do not want it to be included in the annotations which have different other functions. So the first method I have is demo project. Here I'm defining a set property as in I'm saying open the browser by default here. And I'm giving the link as to which application needs to be checked. And I am giving two inputs, which is username and password, and click on login. I also have a method which checks if the login was successful or not. If it's how am I doing that? I'm using assert function here. It checks if the title is Finder Flight Mercury Tours. If after logging in, if it's the title, if it finds, it means that a login was successful. Otherwise, it'll just print you invalid credentials. So I have another annotation called after method. This is basically executed after all the methods in this program are executed. So basically in the end, it quits or it ends the program. And then I have a method called data provider. As you can see in the annotations, I have a data provider. How does the data goes in to this demo project from this data provider method? In data provider method, I have an object config which is of type read Excel file, which is another file of mine where I've created a class called read Excel file. Under that, I have a function which is placed in between try and catch exception where it takes to the Excel path. Now, getting back to main function, we need to extract the input and put it in the username password here. For that, I'm counting number of rows because I have to repeat the testing of application for different inputs. For that, I need to know how many inputs are actually there. So for that, I've called a get row count here. That method basically what it does, it takes the sheet index, it goes to that particular sheet and it gets the last row's number. Once it does that, I'm adding one more because in human language, the index doesn't start from 0, it starts from 1. After that, I'm returning the value, which literally goes back here in rows. So the row value in this demo will be 4 and 4 will be stored here. Now, based on that, I'm creating another object of type array, two-dimensional array. And then I'm calling getData method to fetch the details, one for the password and one for the username. How am I doing that? I'm calling a getData method where I'm passing parameters, sheet number, row, and the column. Here we go. Once the function is called, it goes to that particular sheet number by using the path which is stored in WB. After that, it goes to that particular row, particular column, and stores the value and returns back the value which will be stored here. Similarly here. So this way, login ID or the username and the password are fetched. Then I'm returning this credentials back to my demo project using the username and password here strings, which will be stored in this username and password, and the application will be checked for that particular value. So guys, I hope you've understood the functionality of the program, right? Now let's just run and check if it's working. So I'm going to click on this run function here, run button. As you can see, it has started running. So basically, as you can see, I have 4 values in my Excel sheet, right? So it will check if the application is logging in properly or not for all the 4 values. So it has checked for the first value. It says login successful because I created an account for that credentials, and it's checking for the next, which is company, and the password is also company. It's going to take a while. So guys, the login was successful for the second value as well, and it's checking for the third value, which is admin. It says it didn't work. So it's going for the next value. Here we go again. It's entering the username and the password. And again, the login was unsuccessful because the 2 users in my Excel sheet are not registered users. So it says the test was run 4 times and 2 times it failed because only 2 were the actual registered users and it skipped 0 values. So that's how you do it, guys. So now you know how to actually create a data-driven framework using Selenium. Go ahead and explore for other functionalities. Try to create hybrid framework, which is combination of keyword or any other mixture of any other frameworks. So I hope you've understood what we have learned today. If you have any doubts, you can post them in the comment section later on. So thank you guys.